Work. It isn't the most important thing in life, but for most of us, it's a really big deal. Welcome to Planet Work. We're here to help you get more freedom, money, and fun out of work, because a better life begins with a better career. Good morning, everyone. More freedom, money, and fun out of work. Who doesn't want those three things? Well, today on the Planet Work Show, we're going to talk about gambling and success. What on earth can gambling teach you about success in your career? Turns out a lot. And I don't know what it is, but Anthony Russo does. And he's coming on the show to share with you some of his most valuable life lessons learned in a casino. So, in gambling, the negative progression theory can shred you. In fact, it almost destroyed Anthony Russo. Instead, he learned how to turn the tables in his favor and use a double down strategy, gambling strategy, to turn his life around. And then he used that strategy to build a 6-figure business. That's $1 million, folks, in less than a year. And I don't know about you, but I want to know, how did he do it? So he is coming on the show to share how he did it for himself and how he's teaching other people to do the same. A piece of what we're going to talk about today is failure. It happens in the casino, and it happens in business, and it happens in life. And he's going to talk about how most people spend their lives trying to avoid failure, but he has learned to stare it in the eye, embrace it, and use his failure to grow his life, grow his career, all of that. So he's coming by. We're going to talk about world-class strategies, proven mental models that work to shift your mindset, the art of transforming failure into success, how to raise your own bar by hunting and embracing failure. And we are going to talk about good old-fashioned hard work, but you got to work smart, not just work hard, and so much more. So before I bring him on today, let me tell you a little bit more about Anthony. He is a leadership and performance-based motivational speaker. He also speaks on the importance of patriotism and purpose in life. He is a self-proclaimed failure expert. He's failed publicly more than once. He's failed enough times to eventually, again, have a successful 7-figure business. He's got a really cool mission that he launched called Be the Change. I can't wait for you to hear about that. It's an action-based movement that focuses on action over awareness. He has spoken and hosted events with tens of thousands of people all over the US at concerts and major sporting events. He believes that we all have the power to be the change that we wish to see in the world, and I can't wait to chat with him about it. So with that, let's welcome Anthony onto the show. Good morning.
Morning. So I heard all those things. You just picked me up in a Home Depot parking lot. I have no idea why I'm here, but that sounds fantastic.
Hey, listen, I love me a DIY project, and so why not grab you and let's just do this thing.
let's drill down. Morning.
Good morning, and hello to all our listeners. Hello, Patrick. Good morning. All right, so Anthony, so much for us to talk about today, but we got to start with this whole gambling thing. But I got to be honest, when I first connected with you in the Home Depot parking lot and you said gambling taught you a lot about success in life and business, I was like, what? Come on. I know what the odds are for the house. So tell us about gambling and success. You've got a story, a personal story. Let's just start with that.
Right. I mean, I may look like somebody that just got out of Gamblers Anonymous, but it's not me. It's actually my father. So I grew up in Las Vegas, Nevada. That's where I was born. I lived there till I was about 7 or 8 years old, and my father was a compulsive gambler that played in with a certain style that I had no idea existed. I don't know what it was, but we were, first off, I grew up in poverty type level income. And my father also had multiple sclerosis, so he was disabled. But he played blackjack to an extent, and even today, like I don't know, I just can't bet $100 on a hand, and he would do that based on a system called called negative progression, and that's not as catchy of a title as Double Down Strategy. So The thing with that gambling style is every time you lose, you double your bet. And I didn't even realize that was how he played until many, many years later. I never really had a gambling issue. I went to a casino. My buddy needed some money based on, I felt guilty with something that had happened to him on a work trip with our group. And I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna play a little blackjack. I'm gonna see if I could win. And I go, what if every time and I did the math, I love math. I go, what if every time I lost, I doubled my bet? Because then technically based on this system, if your bet is $10 and you bet and you lose, and then you bet 20, and then you bet 40, and then you bet 80, if you progressively lose, if you get to the end of that, no matter when you actually win, your initial bet up. I'm like, technically, as long as you don't lose like 7, 8, 9 times in a row, you win. So I did. I ended up winning at the casino, and I ended up making $700-800 for him to get what he needed. And I told hard to tell my mom exactly, because we don't talk much about gambling because of my childhood, obviously. I said I did this, and she goes, you realize that's the way your father played. He played with, this negative progression concept. And I go, wow, it's crazy. And I avoid gambling for the most part, and it's just not my addiction. But then years later, I was transitioning out of my successful business and working on Be the Change, and I was trying to figure out how to actually make some money. And I started doing stock trading, options trading, incredibly volatile. And I always said I never had a gambling problem. And then very quickly, I realized that the way that I was working on options was becoming a gambling problem. I was doing this whole thing. I go, you know what? If I lose money, I'm learning from it, which is a great philosophy in life. And I've come to that conclusion big time across the board. But when I really looked at it, it was I was not doing what I wanted to do with my life, but I was doubling down. I never made the same mistake twice. And I realized that one morning after losing 7,400, between 74 and 7,700 in a 15-minute span, trying to do a high risk options trade, I realized that this was about time to sit down, reevaluate what I wanted to do with my life. And then I realized that what I'd been doing all along in life, in business, through the failures, through the successes, was this negative progression, or doubling down. Every time I lost, I analyzed my failures and I got back up. So what almost did destroy my family as a kid, is actually a method that I've learned to approach life with and to approach failure with.
So the double down strategy may not serve you well in the casino, but it serves you really well in life. If what I'm hearing from you loud and clear is if you first stop and assess what worked, what didn't, and learn from it.
Right. And the whole phrase, you got to know when to hold them, know when to fold them. And that's when I came up with this process, was the fact that I was like, all right, do I want to be a day trader? Is that what I want to do with my life? And I'm like, no, I've been a speaker for years. I've always said that my end goal was to motivate, inspire, educate, all these different things. But could I sit at home with 5 computer screens and be a trader? Yeah, I was good at even learning the lessons I was good at. And I knew there could have been a future, but that's not what I wanted to do with my life. So then I used those strategies and realized, yes, you got to analyze. You take postmortems on your failures. It's such a underserved, under-resourced concept, is to go, what got me here? Why did this sale not work? Why did this not go through? Recently, was hiring somebody for one of the businesses that I own, and most people would go, oh, thank you. I know you don't want to work here. That's fine. Have a great day. And I go, can I ask, what was it? What was and I go, it's totally fine. And thank you so much for giving me the call. But why did you not want to work with us? And it was a matter of scheduling and different stuff. But I also know for the next time to also give some options. If it's that important for us to hire, I can learn from that failure. So yeah, analyzation's huge.
Absolutely. So you also say, when we chatted a few months ago in a Home Depot parking lot,
Right.
You said assessing failure is one thing, but dwelling in it is another. So talk a little bit about that.
Well, yeah, and that's the common misconception, is why people try to avoid failure so much. They say, I've always been told to just move on, forget about it, forget about the failures. You don't want to dwell on them, and that's correct. Problem is, we take that far too far. We shouldn't be celebrating our failures per se, but to completely ignore that they happened is dangerous. And it when I say dangerous, it allows us to face the exact same issues that we had faced before. So the way that we've always learned, especially men, but I think we say this for men and women. If you get knocked down, you dust yourself off and you get back up again. And I really thought about that phrase, and I'm like, man, that's missing a pretty key element. Like if you, and I think that we do this in this world way too much. We get knocked down, we get banged in the head, we get back up, and we get banged in the head back again. We get knocked down and we get back up, and it's this over process. So why not think of it in a different way and say you get knocked down, you get back up, you dust yourself off, and before you send yourself back into the battle, analyze what knocked you down. So say you got hit with a right hook. Maybe look out for the right hook and try not to get hit by the same punch again. And then eventually in life, if you're not dwelling in that failure, if you're not saying, oh, I'm going to stay on the ground, I got hit and I don't want to get back up. Instead, you're actually looking at it, well, I know it got me this time. It's not going to get me again. And eventually, not only can you avoid the punches that life throws at you, but you can actually counter punch and go on the offensive and actually create change in your own life. And it really does take analyzing this failure to make that kind of a difference and that kind of a change.
So, all excellent advice. In the heat of the moment, when you're flat on the ground, face is bloody, how do you stand back up again? And you shared with me you had a devastating day in one of your previous businesses where you lost almost $1 million in one day.
Yeah.
Tell us briefly about what happened, and then like literally what did you do to stand back up again?
Yeah.
And recover from that.
And so I actually consider that one of my bigger failures, not the losing the $1 million. I didn't misplace it, to be very clear. It was two businesses that I was in the process of closing that should have been new business. So we were a 7-figure agency, and this would have almost, because it was almost a full $1 million more. We almost doubled our revenue because we were always right around the 1.1, 1.2 mark. And I had brought in a friend that was an old business associate that was going to manage one of the clients, and it was done. Both of them seemed done. So the failure wasn't that I lost the clients. It wasn't that I lost the business in that sense. The failure was the fact that I lost 3 weeks afterwards, because my business, since I started identity marketing in 2011, had been just a steady incline, and there had not been any bumps in the road except for the fact that I was working myself to the bone. I was working 100-hour work weeks, but I loved it. I enjoyed it. I had no problem with that. So this was the first true test and first true challenge. And it wasn't that I was upset that I lost all this business. I was upset because I felt like a fraud. So I had imposter syndrome. I'm like, I had been helping people start their businesses. I had helped people get their head back on straight. And here I was, some guy that lost almost $850,000, $900,000 worth of business because of little mistakes that I probably could have fixed, follow-up that I didn't do. But the lessons were learned from it. I knew exactly what I did, and I would never do it again. The problem was I sulked for 3 weeks. I've never felt that before. I was sitting on my couch. I was eating like soup. I didn't know what to do. And really the biggest lesson I took from it, I mean, it's muscle memory at that point to know what I did wrong and to make sure I didn't do it again. The biggest lesson was the fact that I can't get those 3 weeks back. I still had the same successful business I had before that. The person that came down to work, to be honest, life ended up getting better. She left a job that she was very, very unhappy with in Chicago. She moved to Dallas. It didn't work. She moved back a month later. She held no animosity towards me. And soon after that met her husband, and they've been married. And if she would have never left the other job, the new job that it wouldn't have worked out. So there's a lot of blessings in negative situations, and wasting the time was truly something that I definitely would never do again.
Yeah, I mean, I often say to people, you do need to give yourself a day or two, maybe 3, to lick your wounds
Yeah.
and feel the grief.
Yeah.
And then you just got to get up and just take the next small step. And you actually talk about taking action and why it's really important. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. So, and absolutely, you're right. I'm not saying like, oh, everything went bad, turn it around, buck up, buttercup. I mean, obviously give yourself the time to process, because there is big losses that happen. But in terms of taking action, really we are We are a dwell on what to do society. We have a lot of apprehension, and perfection is this unattainable goal that we seek, and we use that often as an excuse. There was a quote we were looking at in a course that I teach last night. It was about procrastination and perfection, and it's just a different way of looking at it. And when we seek perfection, we end up not taking action. And the only way to truly create change in our lives, in our business, in anything we do in our day, our relationships, all of these different things, if we just overanalyze and analyze and analyze and analyze, you're never going to actually start making the change you need to do in your life. And it creates this kind of permanent black hole. So taking action is incredibly important, which again, I'm sure we'll get into it before we wrap up, but that's the main thought process behind Be the Change too.
Yeah. So, and I want to talk about that. So we've got comments coming in from the audience. Good morning once again to everybody. Amy says perfection is out and progress is in. I love it.
I like that.
So let's talk about Be the Change. So you started this action-oriented movement called #Be the Change.
Yeah.
What inspired that? And what do you do with this movement?
Yeah, so right around 2016, things started to change, and I left my marketing agency in 2018 to try to focus on this. So 2016, there was I live in Dallas, Texas. There was the police shooting in Dallas, and I started looking at things in a different lens, and I saw that we are a country that loves to yell at the top of our lungs without ever actually taking action. So I kind of wrote a manifesto after this police shooting. What it was it was a anti-police protest, and police officers were protecting those protesting against them, which is part of what makes America great, is the fact that we're allowed to have these First Amendment rights. We're allowed to be upset about the people that are in charge of us. But at the same time, I thought it was misguided in a way. And in the end, 5 police officers got killed that day by a sniper or whatever really truly happened that day. We don't know. Well, we do, but we don't. Anyways, so with that, I realized that why are all these people like, what are they upset? What are we upset about as people? And why is protesting the number one thing we go to instead of saying, how can we fix the problem instead of yell at the problem? So it's this concept of action over awareness. And it sounds kind of interesting from somebody that does a bunch of shows and talks a lot about it. But I realized that, first off, I do often put my action where my mouth is. I put my money where my mouth is. But at the same time, I realize that as a professional speaker, as somebody that's good at articulating feelings and having conversations and bringing people together, that part of my skill set is to do podcasts and to do shows and to talk about it. But at the same time, as a whole, not everybody is great at confrontation and talking.
True.
And it's not for everybody. There's people that look at me like, you're okay having an argument? I'm like, absolutely. Like this is what fuels me. Maybe I should have been a lawyer. I don't know. But at the same time, like there was one argument, one conversation, one debate I got in with somebody that's like, how dare you? And it's a person that I knew for a long time, how dare you have these belief systems? And I said, well, why are you so upset about it? And he explained it. I go, I get it 100%. I see where you're coming from. What are you doing about it besides getting on Facebook and being mad for 2 hours? He's like, well, that's all I have time to do. And I go, that's 2 hours in a day that you're spending on it. So couldn't you go to volunteer your time with inner city youth and start making an incremental change? And he's like, well, I don't even know where to go. And I go, well, take your first 2 hours and Google it and find what churches you can get involved in. Whether you're religious or not, churches are great with volunteer opportunities. Everybody always says they can't find. Yeah. And I for years, I was like, where do you volunteer? There's no good website to be like, I want to volunteer.com. So business idea. So look up local churches and you can find stuff to do to actually make an impact on people. And it's that thought process that would change our country and world.
It would. I mean, hey, that's how I got started as a speaker, actually, is I met this phenomenal, inspiring pastor, and she said, you're a headhunter. And I said, yeah. And she said, will you please help us start a networking group? This was 2008. The stock market was on its knees. Unemployment was through the roof. And she said, will you please help me start a networking group to help people who are unemployed? I was like, sure, I'll help you start it. Well, I started that group and I hopped up on stage and said, oh my gosh, I can help so many more people by being in the trenches with them. So it completely shifted my business, my life, all of it just by volunteering.
Yeah.
So it's incredible what, just like you said, 2 hours a week can change not just the lives of a lot of other people, but your own as well.
Right.
It's a really cool thing. So, a lot of people talk about passion. Heck, I do. I'm a stripe changer. I help people find, their passion and a paycheck. Um, and in the middle of all that, it's really, I do a lot. I've got a lot of tools to help people figure out, what do you want to do and why. And you've got a really interesting story about how you found your why. Tell us a little bit about Dr. Frank.
Yeah. So, and I think we're almost coming up on 2 years since he passed away. So it's interesting. I've always been, as I said, I worked 100-hour days. I have no problem with drive, and I think that drive is one of the most important tools in order to be successful. And by be successful, I mean successful and happy. I think we leave out that term. There's a lot of successful people that are not happy. So where I found my why, and everybody talks about it, Simon Sinek, that book went incredibly viral. His speaking went viral. And the whole concept is, when you find your why, then everything else, your drive, it just comes from that. For me, I was 37 years old, and I knew what I liked. I knew that I was driven. I knew that I had passion, but I didn't know what my why was. And Dr. Frank was a friend of a friend that came to us during the beginning of the pandemic. And he's just this jolly old guy that was a doctor, not old. He was, early 50s. And he was so funny. He was brilliant. He started out as kind of a fan that would watch the shows. We did something called Biscuits and Gravy. It was a movie review show with some of the guys he used to work with, and it was comedy, and it was fun. And he would join in on that. And then he became one of the hosts, and he was just brilliant. And him and I didn't share all of the same political ideologies, but we enjoyed the conversation as I started having a political show as well. And when he got sick, he got COVID, and it kind of came out of nowhere. He was still doing shows with us when he had it, and he was fine. He was a little sweaty, and then next thing you know, he went to the hospital and never came out, much like many people in the early part of the pandemic. And I found out when he died, it hit me so much harder than some of the closer deaths I've had in my life, and I didn't know why. I talked to a mutual friend, and also very much from a different side of the political spectrum. And the friend that we had that was mutual said, I talked to Dr. Frank a lot. And one of the things he said to me, once he started watching your show and became friends with you, is that you gave him hope. That there was, he said that he was reaching a dark place even before COVID. He was just realizing, and this was a guy that's a comedian, and he's always smiling, and he's always bringing light to people, but he started losing hope in our world, our country, just the way that people were just not listening to each other, not meeting people somewhere in the middle, not being willing to have a conversation. And he said to her, Anthony, and what he does with Be the Change gives me hope that there is people that are going to be able to change this world. And when he passed away and I found that out, and I actually had an guest interview that day with a girl that talks about, like, the main part of the show is finding your why. And it hit me that my why was the feeling that I get when I find out that I'm making a change, when I'm able to influence people to come together, even if I have a very specific political side. It's more about the conversation of finding truth, finding a middle ground, and being able to agree to disagree again in this country. So being able to bring people together, I found out, was my why, just based on Dr. Frank's passing and what he had said to her a few months before he passed away. And the fact that one of his last thoughts, or one of his, last thoughts in the last couple months of his life, was that maybe the world is going to be better because of somebody like me, and specifically in that case, me. And it gives me something to fight for.
It's incredible when people take the time to share those things with you. And interesting that he didn't tell you that, but it came through somebody else. What a gift that she shared that with you. So shout out to everyone that's tuned in today. There is somebody in your life that you admire. Tell them. Take 10 minutes, pick up the phone, send them a text, whatever it is, buy them a cup of coffee, because we can do that maybe
Again.
right now.
Yeah.
I mean, share it. We spend so much of our life looking and admiring and forgetting to say it. And he has essentially changed your life by noticing what you do and the impact that you make, which is really incredible. So on that note, finding your why, And I had this experience as well. Almost everything that I do in my life today, from a career perspective, was either somebody else's idea or a seed that somebody planted with me. So, don't not only don't be afraid, actively seek feedback, insights. Ask people, hey, what do you think I should be doing with the rest of my life? What do you think I do? Ask people for feedback. Because if you don't ask, they very often won't give it. You got to ask for it. And share, just like your friend did about Dr. Frank's impressions on you. Um, all right. So coaching. So you've been, an incredible motivational speaker, tens of thousands of people. You love getting a crowd going, which is great. You have learned that you really enjoy delivering impact, making, inspiring change, inspiring people to take action. What is it about coaching one-on-one with people that you love the most?
Yeah. So you said something about planting a seed, and it's interesting. This is because I was trying to find my niche when I started doing speaking about 3 years ago. Like, what specifically motivational speaking? I've been, the events have been for 15 years. So when I got to use my own voice and affect people and coaching them one on one, you said planting a seed. So I recently, I talk about double down strategy, and I'm like, what am I really teaching people? Because a lot of times you're trying to find that niche, and it's maybe not the biggest path of speakers that they take, because guess what, a lot easier to get hired if you can come up with a sales strategy that's going to create $100,000 in sales in a week for per person working at a company. But I realized what I do is much different, and in my opinion, it's the most important first step. So I consider myself a soil guy or a soil doctor. I get the soil wet so that these seeds that we do, when you go to a sales conference and that guy that, is a $10,000 or $15,000, $20,000 a day speaker comes in to give you these sales strategies, it doesn't always stick. Why doesn't it stick? Because the person that's listening isn't ready to make the changes in their life. So I work on building that soil, building that foundation. And that's what I love about one-on-one coaching on top of actually doing the speaking is I'm getting somebody ready for their next step. So my speaking, and from day one, when I started working with my personal speaking coach, I'm not the typical. I am somebody that talks about that does great with people going through transition. The great thing is most of us are going through transition without realizing it. Very few of us are fully satisfied with our day-to-day lives. So when you have the ability to talk somebody through what's going to be a major change in their life, and sometimes it's looking to get a promotion at a job, sometimes it's leaving the job, sometimes it's just not worth it. And to be able to interact with a full group, full room of people is a lot of fun. And I think it really gets people started, gets their mind moving. One-on-one, I have very specific things that I get to work with people and get them to realize that life isn't over when things go wrong. The journey needs to be a heck of a lot more fun than we're making it. Imperfection is much closer to perfection than perfection is, or where we think we are. And ultimately, in order for us to change our circumstances, we have to take action and truly be the change we want to be inside of ourselves, not just based on what I said with the movement, but we actually get to learn a lot about ourselves. And that's why I love individual coaching. It's like, I didn't get a psychology degree, but in a lot of ways, it allows me to have that kind of impact. And to be honest, I'll share one last thing. Recently, this is actually a big change, and go ahead and stay on the screen for me, because this is an interesting story. So I was stagnant in middle of 2021. I'm like, things are just not going well. Like, still not coming out of the pandemic. As somebody that's just an event guy, this is kind of a struggle. So I ended up saying, I'm going to give away 5 sets of coaching for free. Like, I just want to find and I did this post with my following on social media, and I said, give me where you are and where you want to be. And I just was led to certain people. And out of the 5, I'm still working with 2. And they've become very close friends of mine. And everything changed within a week. Within that month is when Fox Sports called again, and they rehired me for this awesome contract. And I didn't even realize it till months later that the change started when I said, I'm going to give of myself. But recently, again, had some I just had a couple rough weeks. Like, things were just not going right. I was getting frustrated with some family stuff, etc. Just like anybody. By the way, anybody that talks about being successful does go through stuff once in a while.
Yes.
We're not perfect. We are far from it. And she called me and she said, Anthony, and she's like, I saw she stopped me. She goes, I saw you on your show the other night. What's the matter? She's like, I
Wow.
saw it in your eyes. You were sad.
That's a friend.
And this is somebody that I gave something to, for free but whatever it was. And she said, something, Anthony, when this all started, when you got in touch with me, and she actually has like some bipolar stuff and all these different things that she stopped taking. And I didn't tell her to. She stopped taking medications on. She got healthy. She started losing weight. She got healthier. And she was also going through some major emotional stuff with her family. And she said, I don't know if you know this, but I probably would either be in a loony bin or have committed suicide if we didn't have our weekly talks. And it's like, I'm going through all this crap. And I'm like, you know what? Calm down. It's worth it. And move forward. So that's why individual coaching is fun, whether it's paid or not. It's that kind of impact back on me that makes it even more worthwhile.
Yeah. Ugh. I knew that the time would fly. Here we are as we wrap things up this morning. Thank you, Thank you for taking time out of your busy life to come by and visit with us and sharing your wisdom and your insights. And I'm never going to forget the double down strategy. Very, very cool. So tell us about, you've got a new podcast starting here soon. Tell us about that. And Stefan's been sharing your website where they can find you. Obviously, they can find you on LinkedIn. What's next with you and where can they find you?
Yes, so it's going to be called Blunt Force Discussion, BFD. Get it? Because BFD, big F it. Okay. So it's funny enough, as Stefan made a Joe Rogan joke before the show started. I'm called the basis of it is a Joe Rogan style podcast because it's going to be long format conversation with people that I agree or disagree with. That'll be coming up. I've got my show Truth Will Set You Free that is a little bit more politically minded on Tuesday nights. And then, the big thing is I'm really trying to push the BFD thing. So I've got some big guests lined up because I do have some connections in it, but I'm excited about that show because I think it's the opportunity for me to really have some conversations and utilize my interview skills and go one-on-one with people.
Nice. Fantastic. So there it is on the screen for you. And in the comments as well, Stefan has shared Anthony's website. And thank you so much. Have a great rest of the week and weekend. And I'll have to hunt you down next time I'm in the Dallas area.
Absolutely. We'll talk again.
All right.